Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies, where we explore all things cinema. I want to welcome to the show Stephen Rebello, who is a screenwriter and best-selling author of Alfred Hitchcock and the Making of Psycho, and Dolls, 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 Deep Inside Valley of the Dolls, the most beloved bad book and movie of all time. He has written screenplays for Disney, Paramount, Focus Features, and others. He has written for GQ, Playboy, Movie Line, Hollywood Life, Statement, More, and Cosmopolitan. Stephen, welcome. Thanks so much for joining me today.
It's my pleasure.
And of course, the topic of discussion is his latest book, CRISS-CROSS, The Making of Hitchcock's Dazzling Subversive Masterpiece, Strangers on a Train, which as I told Stephen before we started, I really enjoyed. I was reading a little bit about your background, and I understand you were a therapist before turning to journalism. What made you decide to pursue journalism and leave your career as a therapist?
It's a good question. Well, I had always been interested in both, and I double majored in college. And it's just I'm not a pigeonholed kind of person, and I knew that. I mean, I really loved being a therapist, and I loved working with people and helping them help themselves find their way. But I constantly was writing on the side, and when you're a therapist, when you're a psychiatric therapist, you're also having therapy at the same time it's required. And my own counselors were always telling me, God, you're a really good writer. When I read your reports of your interactions with your clients, it's like a movie. And I mean, it's just the way I've always thought and felt. And so, as I dipped my toe more and more into writing, I mean, I didn't want to give up being a therapist because I loved it so much. But as I kept dipping my toe and having success, I just found I was drawn more and more to communicating with people in a different way, in a different medium. So as I started writing, I realized I loved it too. And I had to make a decision, and I did. I had to make a lot of decisions in my life about what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Right.
I mean, even when I was in grad school, I was auditioning for musicals. I lived in Boston, and there were always touring companies being cast, and they would come in from New York with the New York crew, and I auditioned for a couple of shows and got one, and then I realized, I was in my late 20s, early 30s, and I thought, I'm not going to be Fred Astaire at this point. That's not going to happen. It probably wouldn't have happened if I were 18 or 16. But I just thought I wanted to be really good at something that I loved. And so I decided to keep writing. And I'm really lucky and happy to say that I've worked for magazines and worked in filmmaking and worked all kinds of ways ever since.
I understand that you actually interviewed Hitchcock. Do I have that right?
You do have it right. I did.
Wikipedia, they're not always the most reliable, but I saw it there. I thought, okay, I'll have to ask about that.
Well, yeah, I wasn't the one that wrote that Wikipedia page, but I've checked it. Was
Okay.
a former agent of mine who, got the facts right. So,
Good.
yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, I was growing up in Massachusetts, and my family had really no connection to the movie business or entertainment. They just loved to go to the movies and loved to take me to the movies. And I just remember going to the drive-in theater once, being in the back seat, and my parents were watching The Man Who Knew Too Much with James Stewart and Doris Day, directed by Hitchcock. And I was enthralled. It just grabbed me. Well, it didn't hurt that my mom was a blonde with a beautiful voice, and my dad had a slight stammer and was tall and thin, and people always told him he either looked like David Niven or James Stewart, which I can't think of two more opposite kinds of people. But anyway, I saw what they meant, and so I guess I identified with the little kid who was kidnapped. And of course, now I know that actor. He's actually a friend of mine.
Oh, wow.
Um, but that, that had started my interest in Hitchcock. And then, in those days, that he had a television show, and we were lucky enough to live in a world where Hitchcock was making movies all the time.
Mm.
And I would see them, and I just fell in love with him, his work. And I started calling him when I was a kid. I would, I didn't know that you couldn't, and so I did. I literally picked up the phone and dialed his number. You got a phone number at Universal Studios, and I think what happened, Robert, is that I was just really lucky and or unlucky. They were putting in a new phone in the Hitchcock office, and I think a lot of people were confused about how to use it. And he just pushed a button, and there I was. And so I was a little kid who loved his work and had to tell him about it, and he was patient. And yeah, I was smart and kind of a smart aleck, and I think he was charmed. And we had several conversations. And then when Torn Curtain, one of his movies, opened in Boston, they had a world premiere in Boston that the public could go to. It was a 10 o'clock in the morning screening. I skipped school. A friend of mine could drive. I couldn't. Went to the premiere, and Mr. Hitchcock and his wife were there in this big, beautiful theater in Boston called the Music Hall, it was then. And it was really quite a big event. And I brought a copy of a book that I had by John Russell Taylor, I believe. And I just literally crossed through the lobby to Mr. Hitchcock and asked him to autograph the book, and then told him who I was. And we had a lovely conversation. He and his wife invited me to go to lunch, actually, at Anthony's, a big, beautiful restaurant at the time, but I didn't go.
Oh,
yeah, a big mistake, but I didn't go. Anyway.
remember why you didn't go?
Fear.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
Somehow, when I was talking on the phone, it all seemed like we were on equal footing. But then it's like,
Right.
well, that's actually Alfred Hitchcock, and
Yeah.
I'm a kid from a dad who works in a mill, and my mom's a hairdresser, and I chickened, I caved. But Hitchcock's and my paths kept crossing because I, became a magazine writer, and Ernest Lehman and I did a story together. Ernest had, written North by Northwest, and later, of course, wrote Family Plot, and wrote a couple of movies for Hitchcock that didn't get made. But I interviewed him for a magazine called Movie Line, and he was quite taken with me as a personality and as a talent, and he became my mentor. And it got to the point where he said, if you were writing at the time of Hitchcock, and you were the right age, you would have been working together. And that was that almost made up for my being too chicken to go to breakfast or lunch or whatever it was with Hitchcock and his wife. But in any case, he said, and to prove it, Hitch and I were going to do a movie called Blind Man with James Stewart playing a pianist, a jazz pianist, who regains his sight. He was born blind, I can't remember. They kept changing it. He was born blind, or he was injured in an accident. In any case, it didn't get made because a big sequence was going to take place in Disneyland, and Walt Disney objected to the man who made Psycho being set loose in Disneyland. But Ernie wanted to revive it and wanted me to write it, and it was going to be announced. He got me my agent. We had the same agent, and he sold me to the agency. In that I didn't have a track record, really. I'd written an independent movie, a couple of them, and in any case, it was going to be announced that we were going to do this Blind Man movie together, and it was a very, very, very big financial deal, enormous deal as far as I was concerned. And Ernie became Ernie. He was a very kind of neurotic guy, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go so long with this story, but in any case,
go ahead.
we were we were going to be announced in the trades the following week, but Ernie had an appointment at Cedars-Sinai that I couldn't take him to. Sometimes I would take him to his doctor's appointments, which were endless because he was a hypochondriac. But in any case, I literally couldn't take him to this one. So he took a cab, and he told the cab driver the story of Blind Man that we had been working on together. And the cab driver didn't like it, and it shook Ernie's confidence. And he said, we can't do it. If I can't sell it to like Joe Average, then I'm not going to be able to sell it. And I said, well, you don't have to. I'm going to sell it, and your name is going to sell it. But he collapsed. He chickened the way I did for whatever reason. But what it was, Robert, was he said to me, and I couldn't argue with this. He said, but there are no Hitchcocks anymore to direct it. And there weren't.
Right, right.
I mean, he'd been working with the best of the best. And so it was extremely disappointing and heartbreaking. And anyway, but Hitchcock's and my sort of lives intersected in many strange ways over the years.
That's a whole other book, right? That you could
almost,
yeah, one day.
Almost. Yeah.
I was just before we get into Strangers on a Train, I heard you say that a lot of people, when you wrote your book on the making of Psycho, a lot of people were telling you don't do it because he has better films, which surprised me because I always thought Psycho was like an instant classic. Why were so many people sort of telling you not to do it?
Because they thought he had done more Hitchcockian movies that were more typical of his work, that were really good. I mean, I couldn't argue when they said, well, why don't you write about Rear Window? Why don't you write about North by Northwest?
Right.
But I could argue because for me, really, Psycho was the entry drug into the world of Hitchcock.
Yeah.
And it was the one that sort of caught me on such a primal level that I couldn't think of it in terms of a movie. It was too visceral and raw and real. I just thought, I was staggered by it, and I was a kid when I saw it, but I knew that it was something. It wasn't the usual horror movie that I went to see every week. It wasn't William Castle. It wasn't American International. It wasn't Vincent Price. It was something else. And when you have that kind of reaction, you got to write about it. You got to do something with it. And I've been wanting to do something with it for a long time. But I understood when people did that. But it was discouraging because, the publishers in New York were saying the same thing. They liked my work. They liked, my pitch. They liked all of that. And so that was flattering. But they didn't think Psycho would sell.
Right.
Well, look at where we are now. Yeah. It's still selling.
Yeah.
The movie is still selling, and the book is still selling. It's still in print. But that's really how it began.
Wow. Yeah, because I would have thought even by maybe it's just my generation. When we think Hitchcock, we think Psycho. But I don't know. I would have thought even by 1990 or late 80s, people were thinking, maybe, I guess not. We're thinking
you would think that, except they were thinking of the Technicolor big star movies. That's just how it was, The same thing happened this time with Strangers on a Train, except there were, but this time there were, I think, smarter editors and publishers who saw the why, and they certainly saw that I had the same sort of reaction as I did with Psycho, that there was something about this story I had to tell. You can't buy that,
Right. And I heard you say that the film left such a impression on you when you first saw it. What is it about the film that has left such a lasting impression on you?
I think it's about Bruno. I mean, I think it's about the character of Bruno. I'd never seen a character like that in a movie, and I'd seen a lot of movies when I first saw it. Strangers on a Train for a long time was not very often shown on television, so I didn't really have a chance to see it. But it did come back only once in a while in repertory, when we used to have rep theaters where Lots of movies would be double billed, and Rope and Strangers on a Train were often bracketed for some obvious and not so obvious reasons. And but when I saw Strangers on a Train, it was really Robert Walker's performance as Bruno, and the concept of that character, that he was electrifying to me as an actor, and the character itself was so. I mean, I read the novel right after I saw the film, which is it's a whole different animal in many ways, but the essence of Bruno is the same, that he's dangerous and charming and well dressed and knows how to steer the conversation his way, very much in the tradition of Hitchcock villains.
Yes.
And Hitchcock always, when he was casting the heavy, as they used to call them, or the villain or the bad guy, always tried to avoid the cliche. Don't go for the guy who looks dangerous. Go for the boy next door.
Right.
And that's what he did with, obviously, Anthony Perkins later, but he certainly did it with Joseph Cotten to an extent. He did it with Ivor Novello back in The Lodger. I mean, Gregory Peck, who may be a villain in Spellbound, always the good-looking, attractive guy who could clearly get the girl just on looks and charm alone, but is deeply twisted.
Yes.
And so when it was a time when I saw the film, it was a time of sexual confusion for me, and I got kind of horrified that the one guy in the movie who maybe is gay is the crazy one or the dangerous one.
Mm.
And I began to see that the audience was loving him because he, unlike most of the rest of the characters, was always frank, was always cutting through the nonsense, like Patricia Hitchcock's character, always astounding you and shocking you by sort of telling the truth, not hiding.
Quirky way, yeah.
Yeah. And so, and then when I was leaving the theater, all anyone in that lobby was talking about was Robert Walker as Bruno, and when he did this and when he did that. And I thought, well, okay, maybe it's a little more sophisticated than I know. That maybe they didn't even see him as bisexual or gay. Maybe all they got was, gee, attractive guy. It'd be dangerous to know someone like that, so I think that was always sort of gnawing at me, and also the fact, Robert, that like Psycho, Strangers on a Train, it was not always the movie, and it's still not always the movie that people come up with. Oh, my favorite Hitchcock is so and so, and I can see why. I love all of them, and on a given day, I might say a completely different film is my favorite. Almost any day, Notorious is my favorite. I'll just admit that. But Strangers on a Train, I thought, was always undersung.
Mm.
It just, it somehow people didn't think of it, and yet it's as good as anything Hitchcock ever did. Mm. It has some misses in terms of casting, but in terms of screenplay, which he was never happy with on this one, I think it's got at least 6 or 8 unforgettable moments or sequences, and it's to me very funny, darkly funny, but very, very funny.
Yes.
And I can never resist that. I can never resist the twisted joke. And so, oddly enough, when I was talking with people about Psycho, and I got, because of the Psycho book, they were willing to spend time with me in those days, because they were, what is this guy so interested in Psycho for? And I think it was disarming. I wasn't Spoto. I wasn't coming at them with, let me get the dirt.
Right.
And that was a problem for me, because there were people who were resistant, because they went, oh, another assassin. That's what the Hitchcock, circle called him, the assassin.
Right.
I'm not trying to denigrate Spoto. I'm just saying what happened.
Yeah.
But there was trepidation. But once they saw I was, as they used to call me, the not Spoto, they were willing to talk. Also, I'd been a therapist, and
Uh,
so I knew how to put people at ease,
right.
not to trick them, but just to let them, you know, let their guard down.
Mm.
And because of that, I started asking about Strangers on a Train because I have always seen Shadow of a Doubt, Psycho, and Strangers on a Train as a trio.
Mm.
And so many of those people who worked on Psycho knew Hitchcock for years, and because they trusted me, and because when the book came out, they could see that I was telling the story of Psycho, not trying to put Hitchcock on the couch, which I could have because I had the training as opposed to other people, but I didn't. I don't think that's appropriate. But in any case, they then introduced me to more people in the Hitchcock circle, and I would always take a tape recorder, and I would always ask about Strangers on a Train and other films. So I had so people asking, where did you get all these quotes from dead people? I mean, it wasn't seances. It was, I was just a curious guy, and I had questions for. I came loaded for bear, and so they had really interesting things to say. I mean, it's really one thing to go into an archive and find incredible stuff, because you do, as you know,
Right.
incredible stuff that makes you feel like you're almost there when a movie's being made. But it's
Mm.
a whole other thing when someone says to you, I remember the day on the set of Strangers on a Train when Hitchcock said, well, he said boys, but I didn't put that in the book, but he meant generically crew.
Right.
I'm finally making my first American movie. This is it,
Yeah.
and you're all here. And this person was there, and so I had a lot of that kind of you are there feeling about this movie.
Mm.
And when you add that to the fact that I'm kind of a method writer, when I write a book about a film or something that's set in a certain time, I only listen to music from that era, just to just to hear what people were hearing and feel that. In this case, there was a lot of paranoia. There was a lot of, you could even hear it in the lyrics of music. There was a lot of fear, sort of like now.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I couldn't resist. But anyway, it to me is because context is so important. You can't take, for me now, I can never take Strangers on the Train out of context, because I know that the McCarthy hearings were happening.
Mm.
I know what was happening to people who were suspected of being communist in the government. They were being fired. They were being given lie detector tests. If they were gay, they were being fired. They were being hounded in bars or restaurants or followed. All of these things were going on, and Hitchcock was aware of it, and certainly he had his choice of screenwriters in certain situations, and yet he chose screenwriters and tried to go after other screenwriters who were either bisexual or gay,
Yeah.
knowing that that could be an issue. And he just was, I want the person who will get this, who will understand it, and not make an issue of it. Not make it an issue movie. It's not a Kazan movie. You know what I mean? It's not a isn't this wrong kind of thing. Or it's just that he liked to weave things into the subtext,
Mm-hmm.
things like paranoia.
Yeah, yeah, because I heard you say that in another interview you recently did, which is true. You don't think about the blacklist being also a time of when they were going after homosexuals, going after uh,
Jews,
Jewish
Jews,
people,
black people.
black, yeah, and we think of purely liberals and communists, but
Yeah.
and you're right. I mean, he was so fearless to have hired, gay writer, not Chandler. What I forget the other writer's name.
Well, there's Czenzi Ormonde, and also Barbara Keon, and
Yeah,
also Alma herself.
right.
And of course, he frequently worked with actors he knew were gay.
Yeah.
Um, and it wasn't an issue. Not only did he work with them, they were his dinner guests, often with their partners, which is not something that Louis B. Mayer, for example, cottoned to.
Right.
But Hitchcock and Alma, it was an open house for them.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
so I mean, with CRISS-CROSS and with Rope and others, he wanted to work with Tennessee Williams. You
Yeah.
know, he thought about those things. He thought about certainly casting this one. He certainly thought of Marlon Brando at one point for Bruno, but
Yes.
he,
Yes.
he certainly thought of Montgomery Clift.
Cliff. Yeah.
And of course, William Holden, the most heterosexual actor of the 50s, probably. And see, I can see how that would have delighted Hitchcock
Mm-hmm.
to have Holden and to have Holden and Clift in those roles, not only because they were superb and they were beautiful to look at.
Yeah.
He loved that dis-ease on a set.
Right.
And he loved what it would bring to the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, as from someone who studied him so much? What do you think made him so fearless, particularly at that time when he could have gotten into trouble for hiring and casting some of those people?
Yeah, well, you're right, Robert, and I think that's interesting. It's an interesting question because, after all, when Hitchcock was about to make Strangers on a Train, he was coming off a string of unsuccessful movies, critically and financially. The audience was disconnecting from him. Now that can make an artist do one of many things, but Hitchcock, I think, was a man of extremes. It would either have scared the hell out of him or just made him bolder, and it made him more bold. I think he felt like this was a go for broke movie.
Mm.
And I think it was like three cheers and damn it, let's just do it. Now, having said that, he didn't really go the whole way he could have in terms of even Patricia Highsmith's novel's plot, because he hedged in terms of the hero, who in Patricia Highsmith's book, it's hard to say Patricia Hitchcock, Patricia Highsmith. In any case, the two Pats. The so-called hero in the novel does go ahead with the killing of Bruno's father.
I didn't know that. That would have been pretty interesting in the film if he had done that.
Yeah, I agree. And after all, we go back to Montgomery Clift again, who did something pretty terrible in A Place in the Sun.
Yes.
Basically the same year. They got away with it. Nobody made an issue of it.
That's true. Yeah.
But so he did welch on that. I don't think, well, here's the thing though. He'd gone through 6 or 8 like primo screenwriters whom he wanted to do this movie with, and they all said no. They all, there was a very good treatment by Whitfield Cook, who was probably bisexual, if not gay. But that's only speculation.
Mm.
But that's what was sent out to people like Dashiell Hammett and many writers, Arthur Lawrence, on, and they all said no. And so Hitchcock couldn't be as aggressive as he wanted to. And then he was going after really primo box office and artistic casting. And here's Jack Warner going, no, or okay, if you get William Holden and if you get Montgomery Clift, I'll pay for them, but you're not going to get Grace Kelly. I'm not going to pay for her. You're going to use a contract girl.
Right.
And that's what they said in those days, contract girl.
Right.
And the contract girl in this case was Ruth Roman, and who had many charms and skills, but being an elegant Hitchcockian blonde was not in that, not in her trick bag. Right. And there was always someone on the set whom Hitchcock made pay for not being good enough or being too good looking.
Yeah.
Often the men really got it between the eyes, but no one wants to write about or think about that.
Right.
But in this case, he had a certain kind of woman in mind. He wanted this to be he wanted these people to be very elegant looking, but really sick, the three of them. And he even discussed that with his composer, that the music needed to be neurotic, even if we're trying to show a love situation. There's got to be something in the music that's not quite right. So there are people who do not like the film score, but I think he got the score that he probably asked for.
Mm.
So I'm not trying to defend Hitchcock on everything, because in some things he's indefensible,
Right.
but I think he got mostly what he wanted here, except he never got the script he wanted. Um, I mean, working with Raymond Chandler was for him a nightmare.
Could he not have just had Cook write the screenplay since he liked his treatment so much?
Yeah, great, another great question. Yeah, except Cook was coming off stage fright, not a success for Warner Brothers.
Right.
Jack Warner wasn't sure about Hitchcock at this point, wasn't sure about this particular piece of material, and so he was hemming and hawing about these choices. He wanted stars,
Right.
he wanted marquee value. And certainly having a Dashiell Hammett would have given him that, or Raymond Chandler, and that's why Raymond Chandler was pursued, although his track record in Hollywood was pretty abysmal,
Mm.
and not always his fault, but in this case, yes, very much his fault.
Mm.
Um, you know, Hitchcock loved Billy Wilder's work, and if Wilder had only told him what a nightmare Chandler was with Double Indemnity, he could have saved Hitchcock a lot of trouble. But Billy Wilder was many things, but a generous person he wasn't.
Right. The casting, it's I never had a problem with Ruth Roman in it. I always thought she was good. But then I mean, watching the film after reading the book and seeing like, yes, he wanted Grace Kelly. I'm like, now I could completely see why she wasn't quite right. Ruth Roman. I mean, I think she's pretty good. I mean, she had to have a lot of nonverbal moments as well, like
Right,
putting everything together and discovering what's really going on with Bruno, and a lot of that has to just come through in her reactions. But she's just not quite doesn't have that upper class poise that Grace Kelly has. You know,
right, and also warmth.
right?
And
Yeah,
Hitchcock found Ruth Roman very unsexy, which is, it's a cardinal sin for him. He always wanted the woman who looked elegant and untouchable, but you knew there was a fire underneath, and he
right.
never felt he was getting that from her. And he tried, and I think she tried. It just wasn't in her wheelhouse. And she took diction lessons and elocution lessons and tried for a kind of Back Bay Bostonian accent,
Yeah,
but it didn't quite work. I don't think she's bad.
yeah,
I
no,
just
not at all.
I just don't think he. I mean, I can hear and see what he was after now. So can you.
Yeah,
And,
exactly. Yeah,
and that's how that once you've made that kind of commitment, you go. Oh. But then again, he would probably have resisted anyone Jack Warner had
mm,
suggested,
right,
because he didn't like to be told what to do,
right.
especially with casting. And
Yeah.
he'd already felt that he hadn't gotten the too many wanted, so he was already, in the catbird seat.
Mm. One thing, and that I've seen the film a number of times, but it completely went over my head, the homosexual subtext. And then now I can't unsee it. That's the great thing about.
I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
not at
so
all.
sorry.
It made it richer. It made it richer for me and much more interesting on a character level, because there's so many things. So watching it again after reading the book, there's that part when Bruno is stalking um, Farley Granger's character and Guy, and
Mhm.
at one point, one of his lines, he says, "Well, I didn't want to come out in the open with it," or it's something along those lines. And I thought, oh my God, how did I not see that? What the quote, coming out of the, he doesn't say closet, but coming out in
Right.
the, and like, hint, hint.
Yeah.
And there are,
Well, and
uh,
the way
not
and
a
the way he does it, he's always so breathy.
yes, yeah,
You know what I mean? He's almost like Ruth Roman breathy, you
yeah,
know. And if you notice the numbers of times that Robert Walker like looks Granger up and down,
yeah.
it's unmistakable once you see it.
I can't believe I
And
never saw it. I mean, yeah, he
yeah,
played
but neither did the censors. Neither did I mean, and Czenzi Ormonde, the screenwriter, insisted it's not there. It
right.
was never in the novel, and it's not in the film. So you know, it's I guess it's eye of the beholder. But that's the great thing. One of the many great things about Hitchcock movies is that you can enjoy them on so many levels, and you can enjoy them at different times in your life and see them in such different ways.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, when I was a kid and I saw The Birds, I was just like, oh man, this is just. Then later I saw it, and it just struck me as so sad and strange, and these these poor people, and it's the same movie. The movie doesn't change. You just do.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there are people who love this movie, Strangers on a Train, who've seen it many, many times, and these kinds of things we're talking about didn't occur to them, and that's fine.
Right.
That's fine. It can be enjoyed on so many levels.
So many. Yeah.
One scene can't be unseen, if you ask
Right.
me. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And
And then, of course, I'm sorry, I was just going to say, and then, of course, Robert Walker telling Farley Granger, well, I'm going to play Bruno as a homosexual.
yes, yes. And completely you can, like you said, looking him up and down, he's uh flirtatious things. I mean, yeah, you can completely see it once you know that.
Or the way he rolled his eyes and said, I've had a strenuous day. It's just like, okay, I
Yes.
get it.
Yeah. No, it's again, I agree with you. He's brilliant in the film. It's a shame he died shortly after at such a young age. Um,
He was a really tortured soul.
yes, yeah,
And
yeah, no, I don't, it's funny, this film and the one with Judy Garland he did are the only ones I've seen him in. Is it
uh,
Walk? I haven't seen him in films.
that's a lovely movie.
Really good, yeah.
He's so touching with her, and they're both. You can just see that they're both such vulnerable actors and just such vulnerable people, and they really mesh beautifully.
Yeah.
But it's really fun to see him in his Private Hargrove movies, where he's the young raw recruit in the service, and all the girls are crazy about him, and he's just a boy next door.
Right. Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons he was so thrilled that Hitchcock saw him this way, because
Yeah.
it takes. I know it's a cliche now, but it takes somebody to see you,
Hmm.
to see underneath. And of course, Hitchcock loved gossip. I mean, when I met him, he wanted gossip from me, and Ernie said it used to drive him crazy because they were supposed to be writing North by Northwest, but Hitch would always want to know what party he'd been to that night and who did what and who made a spectacle of themselves. And Ernie and I came to the same conclusion that it wasn't just that he was a repository of gossip. He wanted to find out who was discontent, who was unhappy,
Right.
who had something to hide,
Right.
because those are the people he was after.
Yeah.
Those are like if they had talent and they were beautiful and they also had a secret, that's what he loved.
Mm.
And of course, with poor Robert Walker, who had psychological difficulties from the beginning, but they were exacerbated by his marrying Jennifer Jones, who herself was a lovely but troubled person. They always reminded me of. Did you ever see the movie The Enchanted Cottage?
I have.
It's a really lovely movie about two physically deformed people who, and through the movie you only see them as beautiful because that's how they see each other. But occasionally you get glimpses of them. It's Robert Young and Dorothy McGuire, The Enchanted Cottage. Hitchcock offered the chance to direct it at one point. But in any case, Robert Walker and Jennifer Jones always remind me of those two people because they were they led a very cloistered life and they supported each other. And then suddenly Hitchcock's nemesis, David O. Selznick, comes in and falls in love with this young Jennifer Jones, takes her away from Robert Walker, shatters Walker's already fragile existence. And so there was an extra added attraction in Hitchcock's bonding with Robert Walker because they both loathed David O. Selznick so much that that it gave Hitchcock an extra element of happiness that he was going to show that Robert Walker had a future, that he was a terrific actor, and that he wouldn't necessarily be destroyed by the loss of Jennifer Jones, but it changed. I mean, it physically changed him. If you really see him and look at him in The Clock, and then or Private Hargrove movies, and then you see him in Strangers on the Train, you can see the suffering. You can see that he'd been through hell. I mean, still a young man, but
Yes.
Sadness in his eyes.
Right. One thing you mentioned, and which I hadn't dawned on me, was that the composer Dmitri Tiomkin had also did Dial M for Murder, I Confess, and Shadow of a Doubt. Of course, when we think Hitchcock composers, we think Bernard Herrmann. Any idea why his scores are less popular among film fans? Because I mean, I never even knew he collaborated that often with someone else.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's another interesting question.
Hard to answer, but
I think everybody needs a champion. Hitchcock has been championed and he's been elevated to the mountain and he's been knocked off. And it's always someone writes a book and then that becomes the story of that person. There hasn't been a big sort of groundswell of appreciation for Dmitri Tiomkin, although he's a pretty colorful, interesting guy. Honestly, Herrmann's music is so much a part of the kind of the inner landscape of Hitchcock that I always want him to have done the score. I wish he had done the score for this movie, but yeah, I mean, and again, I think that's one of the reasons why Strangers on a Train has not been as canonized as some of the others before now. That is. Because it doesn't have Cary Grant or Grace Kelly. It's not in Technicolor and VistaVision. It hadn't had a book written about it. And, people love and fall in love with sometimes what they know and what they get to see more often and what respected people or not respected people tell them about that work. That's why with this book, what you're saying is really wonderful to me because it tells me that I have sort of helped you see a movie in a movie that you know very well in some different ways.
Sure.
And that was really one of the reasons why I wanted to do it. And I knew that there was a story behind this movie, and I wanted to tell it.
Yeah.
I don't think that every Hitchcock or any other director's movie needs a book about it. That's not what I think. But when it has a story about it with interesting people. I mean, the people in this story are giants, and they were all really complicated people, and they all had something to prove. And so I found that intriguing. When I was doing the interviews for Psycho, and I would be asking about Strangers on a Train, I could tell by the way people were talking about it that there was something delicious going on that set. Most of it good, but some of it just perverse. And I thought, yes, I want to tell that story. So,
is any chance we'll see a film about the making of this, like the Hitchcock book, or maybe a series, which is more popular nowadays?
Well, I'm not going to lie and say that there haven't been inquiries. There have been, but at this moment there isn't a deal, so I can't really say anything, but I wouldn't be surprised. It's just the whole idea of people making a movie sort of don't pay attention to us. We're doing something subversive while the blacklist is going on. I find that irresistible.
For sure, yeah.
And you've got people whose lives could have been ruined by
Yeah.
the blacklist, making the movie that they hoped they were, that would change their lives and careers. To me, that's a compelling story.
Yeah.
We shall see.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see.
Well, the story that I wanted to tell in Hitchcock, the Hitchcock movie, is very, very different from the movie that they, in the end, decided to tell. But that's a whole other story.
Right.
Hopefully, this time I would have more control and input, or I just won't do it.
Right. Last question I had was one thing that I thought was really interesting about his films in the 40s, which is you quoted him as saying you wanted to see if an actor could sustain a picture. I thought, yeah, because they're very dialogue heavy. You know, you look Under Capricorn, Rope, Stage Fright, but we're, as you said in the book, we've been seeing lately people show a real appreciation for those movies. Because I love Lifeboat's another one. I love Lifeboat. I love Rope. I was just curious what you thought of. Is there any of those films in that period that you like a lot personally as well?
You said one, Lifeboat, and I love that
Love
film.
Lifeboat. Yeah, I think that's a masterpiece.
I do too. Yeah, I loved that movie from the very first time I saw it. I mean, just the Tallulah Bankhead of it all.
Yeah,
and
brilliant.
you can enjoy it on that level, but the characters and the stress they're under, and
yeah,
it's so compelling, and what it has to say about fear of the other,
yes,
and lynch mobs and all of those things. I mean, it's a really, really powerful movie. It's beautifully acted almost all the way through.
I agree. Yeah,
but I mean, Hitchcock was not, he listened to critics, and they were telling him in the 40s that the films were, too plot heavy. And so he started to think, well, I've got Ingrid Bergman, and if anyone can carry a soliloquy, it's Ingrid Bergman.
Yeah.
But that isn't what we went to Hitchcock movies for.
Right.
Really, a lot of talk.
Mm-hmm.
Talk while running, or talk while hanging off something for dear life.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he finally decided, Hitchcock had a hard time finding material, because if you're going to stay in a genre, you're going to be doing variations on a theme, and people are going to get tired of it. And if you stray, he wanted to see how far he could stray from that.
Yeah.
And he tried, but it just wasn't working. But with Strangers on a Train, I think he found himself. He came home again.
Yeah.
And of course, it began to lead to the astonishing movies of the 50s, which
are absolutely
pretty peerless. So, I mean, I think this is the movie where he got his groove back, and he certainly got his confidence back. And, the movie was successful, but not so successful that it couldn't be brought back after Psycho and make even more money, which is what happened in England, for example, where it was playing and playing and making so much money. And those stars meant nothing anymore. It just, in that short time, Farley Granger's name unfortunately meant nothing.
Right.
Ruth, woman, they'd been forgotten.
Right.
But again, Hitchcock had become the star at that point. So, you could sort of structure an entire ad campaign and publicity campaign around Hitchcock, as was done in Psycho, and to an extent The Birds. So, not to his credit, I think.
And now I understand you have another book in February coming out on Hitchcock.
I do.
He
won't quit. Yeah, it's a very different kind of thing. I got very interested looking at a lot of movies as I do for various reasons. I started seeing the numbers of movies that started really back in the late 30s that were already imitating Hitchcock. And I thought, this is an interesting topic.
Hmm.
because they were pretty bold about it. And so I thought, I want to look at directors and screenwriters and producers who were interested in doing a Hitchcock, because that was already sort of a thing. That was a brand. And again, they started doing it in the 30s and 40s. So
Hmm.
I've written a book called Hitchcockian. I just wanted to call it Hitchcockian, but it's called Hitchcockian Thrillers. But it goes right up to the present.
Oh, wow.
So it's a look at the De Palmas of the world and the David Finchers of the world and Scorsese, they've all taken a turn in Hitchcock land. Scorsese's about
Sure.
to do it again.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun to write. But
Oh,
was one of the things that was really fun was that the numbers of those movies, including The Uninvited, that Hitchcock was talked to about directing it, and even gave story notes.
oh, wow. Hmm.
So yeah, there's a lot of talk right now about my doing another making of book, but I've done On the Waterfront, I've done Valley of the Dolls, I've done this. Take a breather, and
Take a
I think
break.
might do a biography next time,
Okay, great.
not a Hitchcock biography.
Right. Well, we look forward to that. Are you do you, I know you have Instagram, but are you big on social media for people want to follow you?
I'm enormous on social media. No, I mean, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram. That's about it.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't TikTok. Not today.
Yeah. Sorry. When I said big, I meant like
No,
person fan of
I
this.
am big. It's the social media that got small. Uh,
Well said.
uh,
Well, I'll leave the.
I knew what you meant. I just wanted to play.
Okay. Just wanted to be sure. Um, I will leave the links in the description box for where you can follow Stephen on social media. And again, the book is called CRISS-CROSS, The Making of Hitchcock's Dazzling Subversive Masterpiece, Strangers on a Train. It's out now. Highly recommend people get it. It'll certainly enrich your experience if you've seen the film before, as it did for me. So, Stephen, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it, and I hope you can come back again on your next book.
Well, I had a good time. I'd love to come back. Thanks for this. Thanks for all the good questions.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. And thank you all so much for watching. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link patreon.com/RobertBellissimo at the movies for full details. You can also leave a donation, or what I call a tip, by clicking the thanks link, which you will find directly below the video frame. Just click on that and you can leave a donation if you choose to. Of course, I would greatly appreciate that. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so. By pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movie logo, you will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left. In just a second, just click on that. And then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new videos. I would also really appreciate if you leave a comment, share the video, like the video. All of these things create traction onto my YouTube channel and really help share the video far and wide, and the channel in general. So thank you so much for doing that, and I will see you all in the next one.